AT, it's good to talk to you, man. How you doing?
I'm good. A couple things. One, I do want to promote. I went on Ty's podcast the other day. Ty, of course, is your coworker. He works in the mornings. You guys probably never see him because you guys probably don't get into it later. So that's one. Check it out. It was a fun interview with him. Two, who did I get bumped for? Was it Sam Pittman? Was it Dave Van Horn? Was it Coach Muss? Was it the women's coach who's really good, but I forget his name? Who did I get bumped for? I need some answers.
Is it okay if it was Chris Stewart from the Alabama Crimson Tide Radio Network? We talked a little CFP with him, and that was the time he could do it. So, is that all right?
Wow.
Are you okay with this?
I have no interesting things to say on the CFP. You gotta cover Alabama now. You got to be best friends with Nick Saban. That's how it goes. Okay, good to know.
Well, yesterday we were best friends with Kirby Smart because we had we had Jeff Dantzler from the Georgia Bulldogs Radio Network. So now we're getting the totally unbiased perspective, which is what you're all about. So what do you think about it?
The Aaron Torres Media Network. Yeah, I got you. What do I think? I'm naive enough to think it's certainly going to be a much more competitive game. And it's so funny, guys, because I guess we haven't talked since the semifinal, but I bring it up because about I'm filling in last week during the Alabama game, leading up to the Alabama game, in the Alabama game. And I kind of realized that my logic for picking Michigan made no sense. And my logic was pretty simple. I said, I think Cincinnati can keep things close against Alabama, because I'm not going to let a 12-game sample size of Alabama, where they were very good but not elite by their standards. I'm not going to assume that one game where I saw the best of them is who they are going forward. But then I also picked against Georgia under the same logic. Well, they played really bad against Alabama. Their season's over. And I was like, wait a second. I had a 12-game sample size against Alabama. I said none of it mattered. And I said I have a 12-game sample size with Georgia, and I said that's all that matters for Bama. It doesn't matter for Georgia. So I bring all this up, Phil, to say I think it's going to be more competitive. I hope it's going to be more competitive. But I think we all kind of know what are going to be the X factors in this game. Can you get pressure on Bryce Young? A&M sacked him 4 times in the win. Auburn sacked him 7 times in a double overtime loss. LSU sacked him 4 times in a game where it was a 6-point final score. Georgia sacked him 0 times last time they played. Is Georgia going to stay committed to the run? Are they, if they fall behind early, are they going to feel like they have to get all their points back in a hurry? And then there's the Kirby Smart factor, which we all know. So, it's interesting, guys. You guys do the same thing I do. And when we turn on that mic, we always want to have the most unique, interesting perspective of anybody that does. This is why we do it, and we love it. This is one I don't think there's really any other perspective, right? Like we know what Georgia has to do to keep this competitive, if not win. It's just a matter of if they're going to do it. Is that reasonable to say?
Absolutely. I mean, I think most of the guests that we've had on, they've all said the same thing, and that includes the 2 guys that host the pre- and post-game because they know it just as well as anybody else does. So let me ask a question from a different perspective then. I'm excited about this game. I mean, I've seen Georgia and Alabama up close, and fans around the SEC were kind of expecting this game to happen. But outside the purview of the SEC, let me ask about where you live in Southern California. What are people sick of this? Or people in Southern California excited about this matchup? Because this is supposed to be a national sport, and it feels like it's been regionalized specifically within the Southeastern Conference.
Well, it's a great question, Phil. What I would say is the SEC stuff, and I may be totally oblivious to it because I cover this for a living. I tend to think that it's a little bit overrated, right? I think there's some things that start getting talked about, and we all assume that there's all of this pushback on the other side. And I don't think there is. I'll give you an example, like the player opt-out stuff. Like, I think there's still a belief that most people don't believe that players should opt out of bowl games, where I feel like I don't want to say 99, but probably 90+% of people that I talk to kind of understand, if they're not playing for a national championship and they have millions of dollars to protect and they have every right to sit out a meaningless bowl game. I didn't see guys, let me ask you. Let me throw it back to you. Did you see 1 million people crushing Traylon Burks for deciding not to play in the Outback Bowl? What percentage would you say, really quick, Phil?
Well,
half of 1%.
I'd say very small. There was disappointment that they didn't get a chance to watch him play another game for Arkansas, but there's a different feeling in this last week with players that were still on the team that are entering the transfer portal.
Oh,
that's a conversation.
Yes. No, that's a different conversation. And so I bring it up because I feel like there's this narrative where, everybody thinks that people hate the SEC. I don't get that sense at all. I get the sense that Ohio State fans are going to be watching this game wishing their program was a little bit closer to Alabama than it is. I get the perspective that Michigan fans are going to be watching this game saying, darn, we just lost to a really good football team, because I just don't get the sense that people – I don't believe that most people believe that SEC bias, at least at the top of the conference, really exists. Like, I think during the regular season, when you see a 7-5 or a 7-4 SEC team get into the top 25, but then you see a one-loss Pac-12 team not in there, like, that's when people think SEC bias exists. But I guess what I would say is I don't think that's that at all. I think USC fans are watching this game saying, man, I hope Lincoln Riley can get us to this level. I think Ohio State fans are saying, what do we have to do to get ourselves to this level? And so I think most people are excited, and I think most people are excited too, because these are clearly the two best teams. Georgia was number one all year. Alabama beat them on a neutral field. Michigan looked like a contender. Georgia destroyed them by transitive property. If Alabama destroys Georgia and Georgia destroys Michigan, and Michigan looks like the closest thing to the two of them, then we know those are the two best teams. So, this isn't a year where somebody snuck in the side door, there was debate, and this team didn't really deserve to be in. I think at least in this case, Phil, and I know this was a very long way to get to this point, I think most people kind of say, hey, these are the two best teams, let's go enjoy this game.
AT, talking about, if the rest of the country, enjoys the SEC and enjoys what we have in front of us here on Monday and what we've had, for a long time with Nick Saban and Alabama, the last team that I can kind of barely remember of people having somewhat of fatigue, and I want to get both of y'all's points of view on this because, AT, you're still a young guy, but you are older than me, so you might remember this a little bit better than I do. USC, was there any USC fatigue, back in the early 2000s like we supposedly see with Alabama?
No, and the reason why is because USC really had about less than 5 years. And I think, to me, this is why I always say never take Nick Saban for granted, right? It's like the same with Tom Brady. Like, we're never going to see a 44-year-old quarterback just, I'm going to switch teams at 44 years old and just win a Super Bowl. Like, that's never going to happen again, so just enjoy it. And that's what makes Nick Saban so incredible is, in my life, Drew, there's been these teams that really rise up, and it's a 3-4 year window, and then it's done. I'll tell you a funny story. So Miami in the early 2000s. 2000, if there was a 14 playoff, they would have been in, they would have won. That was a weird year where they beat Florida State in the regular season. Both teams finished with one loss. Florida State gets in the championship game over them. They win the championship in 2001. Okay? 2002, they get back to the championship game where there's a famous, whatever you call it, pass interference play. Mm-hmm. I remember talking to somebody on the staff at that Miami team. Remember, Drew, 3 years. Mm-hmm. 2000, one loss, should have competed for a national championship. 2001, win a championship. 2002, get to the championship game. And they were on the field before the game, and one of the staff members was talking to a pretty prominent football person, and he's just kind of looking around and smiling. He says, man, I don't know how long this is going to last, but I'm going to enjoy every second. And the guy says to him, he says, it's already over and you don't know it. And essentially what he was saying was there are going to be cracks in the foundation, and you're never going to have a 3-year run like you have right now. And so obviously Miami's never been the same since. And it was pretty similar to USC. And that's what makes what Saban does so incredible. Everybody talks about, Alabama fatigue. This guy's been at the top of the sport for 15 years, guys. And what's so incredible to me is not only the players, but the coaches that you lose Lane Kiffin. You lose Brian Dable, never forget, who's a hot NFL candidate right now. You lose Steve Sarkisian, and the machine just keeps on churning. I mean, we've all seen the graphic of the 2015 coaching staff that had Mario Cristobal, Mel Tucker, Billy Napier, Lane Kiffin, Kirby Smart all on one staff. they're all obviously gone, and Alabama hasn't missed a beat. So, Drew, I think Alabama fatigue for some is real. I just look at it as we're never going to see anything like this again. And no, there was never any USC fatigue because it was like a comet. 2-3 years, nobody could beat them. Then they have kind of a year where they lose kind of at the top of the sport, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's over Pete Carroll's in the NFL. So that's a really long-winded way of me saying, like, just enjoy Bama. I mean, you guys have to play them every year, so it's different. But I think as the casual fan should just enjoy Bama because we're never going to see anything like Nick Saban again.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You know, when we had Chris Stewart on last hour, he's talking about how it's shocking to him being somebody who grew up in Alabama that at the end of Monday night, Nick Saban could have more rings and more national championships than Paul Bear Bryant at Alabama. So it is something you haven't seen.
True, and let me jump in on that. And I think I even talked about this after they won it last year. And I don't know if I would say this if this was, ESPN Tuscaloosa instead of ESPN Arkansas, because it offends a certain segment of the pop. What Nick Saban is doing is better than what Bear Bryant did. And it's no disrespect to Bear Bryant, and this isn't like me saying, oh, my generation's better than your generation. But you got to understand, I mean, back then, and Phil knows this, you just crowned a national champion at the end of the year. And sometimes, as a matter of fact, you crowned a champion before the bowl games. You could crown a champion at the end of the regular season. So for Nick Saban to do it in this era with fewer scholarships, by the way, to do it in an era where you have to go to an extra game just within the SEC, 12-game regular season, and now you have 2 playoff games on top of that. I mean, it's incredible. We're never going to see anything like this. We're never going to see anything like this again. And I've actually seen a lot of people, I think, smartly start this conversation this week of, we don't need to expand the playoff. We just need to wait out Nick Saban because their parity will come naturally once Nick Saban leaves. But until then, we just got to enjoy this. So,
yeah, but ESPN's going to get what they want. They want a bigger playoff. They're going to get a bigger playoff. Right. They gave Jimbo Fisher a 4-hour commercial for the MegaCast on Monday. They're the most powerful. They're the single most powerful force in all of college sports, and that's not going to change. So I don't think I keep hearing, and you and I've gotten into this before too, and I think you're right. I think you're right. On most years, there are only 3 teams that really have what it takes for a shot to win a national championship. But I don't really know if that's what it's about. For ESPN, it's about more compelling matchups, less players opting out, better games that lead into the Final Four. Maybe changes a little bit of the competition, but when it comes right down to it, it's about money. And in capitalism, that's what it's supposed to be about.
No, you're right, Phil. And I will say, too, I do think I'm curious to see how some of these coaching hires that happened in the last 6 weeks or so, how they shape the next generation of college football. Nick Saban, we think he's going to be around. He's not going to be around forever. It seems like it now, but he won't be. Lincoln Riley, he has all the tools from Oklahoma now in a better recruiting hotbed. Does it work there? Mario Cristobal, 2 Pac-12 championships, 3 or 4 Pac-12 championship game appearances. Now he's in Miami, better recruiting base. What does that mean? Florida, we'll see what happens with them with Billy Napier. Oklahoma, we'll see if we can maintain it. But I just bring it up to say I'm hopeful that some of the spreading of the good coaches across the country, some of these programs seemingly getting their hires right, I hope that naturally leads to a little bit more parity. Again, maybe Michigan coming off a playoff appearance, assuming Harbaugh stays, maybe they can elevate just a little bit and Ohio State drops just a little bit, and now all of a sudden it isn't Ohio State winning the Big Ten 9 out of 10 years. That's my hope. We'll see if we get some more natural parity, but you're right, Phil. I mean, it's a good point, is that I can sit here and yell and scream about we don't need to expand the playoff, but at the end of the day, there's too much money involved. When it happens, I don't know, but it is going to happen.
It definitely will, AT. And we could talk college football with you all day, but I do want to get your opinion on Arkansas basketball. And one of the things that you like to put up on Twitter when you talk about Arkansas is, can anyone stop the hog invasion? Well,
yep.
Lost 2 back-to-back in the SEC. Has the hog invasion come to a stop? And what do you think is wrong with this Arkansas basketball team?
First of all, we have some Big Pig Invasion T-shirts that I just printed up. Yeah. So anybody that wants them, the Hogs are going back on a win streak. I'll have to get a few in the mail to you guys at some point. But the Hogs are going back on a win streak. And so you get your Big Pig Invasion T-shirt now because they're going to go fast once Arkansas starts winning. But with that said, Drew, I mean, I guess I have to be serious and stop selling T-shirts here for a second. I think there's reason to be concerned. And what I would say is, Vandy's improved. Now, I actually feel bad for Vandy because apparently they're not letting students in their games anymore, which is just ridiculous. And I think that's going to hurt them. They play Kentucky next week at home, all that stuff. But I think they're improved. Scottie Pippen might be the best player in the conference. But, again, you're coming off an Elite Eight appearance. You need a better performance than that at home. I still cling to the idea that this team was not great this time last year, and it really wasn't until the end of January, the beginning of February, they started to hit their stride. There's been injuries with J.D. Notte. But listen, I also can't deny that a lot of the problems have been prevalent from the beginning of the season, and they haven't gotten fixed in 6-7 weeks since things started. You guys might have better insight than me, but I'm stunned that Devo Davis is not playing at a level that's different than he is right now. And it's not all his fault, but I'm surprised by it. He was my preseason pick as SEC Player of the Year. Obviously the three-point shooting hasn't been great. The rebounding has been inconsistent. The defense has been inconsistent. I think, I talked about it a little bit on my podcast the other day, but I think that's where I don't think it's just Arkansas fans that are frustrated. I'm guessing the coaching staff is pretty frustrated too, is some nights the defense is lights out, nobody can get a bucket, and then you can't score, and then there's other nights like the Hofstra game where you can't stop anybody, you score 80-plus points and you don't win the game. And so I'm clinging to this idea that it takes time and that the pieces will figure themselves out, but I also have to be realistic and say, it's now January 7th, we're in the heart of SEC play, and it's time to whatever changes need to be made, it's time for those changes to be made because there's too much talent on this team to not have the success that we all expected in the preseason. And as I said, there are some SEC losses that are going to be inevitable. I don't know that losing to Vanderbilt at home is one of them.
And the schedule that Arkansas is facing in the month of February looks like the freaking eye of mortar for crying out loud. All right, Aaron, we're up against it, so we'll leave it there.
Has you covered for all the holiday season. More props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your #1 spot for all sports action. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus with the promo code BELIEVE to receive your bonus. That's BLEAV to receive your bonus. And it's not just football. BetOnline has pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, even your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all these amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports.